you were taught that hard work is the holiest of virtues, that the more you grind, the more you matter, that suffering is not only expected, but necessary, a sacred tax on the path to success. From the very beginning, you were fed a gospel of exhaustion, baptized in the belief that your worth is something to be earned, not something inherent. You watched the people around you give everything they had and still come up short. You saw your parents stretch every dollar, never complaining, just surviving, quietly, dutifully. You saw teachers praise discipline over rest, employers reward loyalty over boundaries, and society bow to burnout while whispering, "This is just how it is." And you believed them, because you were young, because they sounded certain, because no one told you that the system they worshipped was built on forgetting your wholeness. But what if the virtue of struggle is a myth? What if the glorification of suffering is not a sacred truth but a spell, one cast so slowly, so softly, that you didn't even notice you were under it? It wasn't conjured with wands or incantations. It was sewn into lullabies and storybooks, into gold stars for pushing through pain, into applause for self-sacrifice and shame for rest. It was echoed in your mother's weary sighs at the end of the day, in your father's quiet pride as he skipped every vacation, in the reverence given to those who never said no. You didn't just learn to work, you were taught to prove your value, prove your decency, prove you're not weak, not selfish, not lazy. And the only acceptable offering? Yourself. But here's the brutal truth. Most people aren't working to build a life. They're working to justify their right to exist. They're not climbing toward freedom. They're circling a loop, hoping one day it might open. The loop says, work more, prove more, suffer more. And maybe, just maybe, you'll be enough. But that moment never comes, does it? No matter how many hours you clock, how many tasks you complete, how little you sleep, it's never quite enough to quiet the voice that says you should be doing more. This isn't because you've failed. It's because the system was never designed to validate you, only to use you. As long as your worth is tied to your output, you will never feel safe to rest. As long as you believe you have to earn your peace, you will live in quiet panic, waiting for permission to breathe. But the truth, the one they never told you, is that you were never meant to prove your worth through pain. You don't matter because of what you do. You matter because you exist. You matter because you are. The most dangerous lie is the one that convinces you that struggle is a virtue, that depletion is noble, that burnout is a badge of honor. And as long as you live inside that lie, you will keep calling your exhaustion ambition and your self-abandonment discipline. You will call it hustle. You will call it drive. But really, it's just survival in disguise. You don't need to suffer to be seen. You don't need to break to be worthy. You don't need to constantly produce to be allowed to simply be. That's the spell. And breaking it doesn't mean becoming lazy or apathetic. It means returning to yourself. It means remembering that you were whole before they taught you otherwise. Because the truth is, no matter how long you run on the hamster wheel, it never takes you anywhere new. It just makes you forget that you already had wings. There is a kind of exhaustion that sleep cannot touch. The kind that settles deep in the bones of your spirit. The kind that doesn't come from doing too much, but from doing what was never yours to carry. That's the exhaustion people don't talk about. The fatigue of living a life built on borrowed beliefs, of chasing milestones you never chose, of performing identities that kept you safe but never made you whole. You wake up every morning and put on the mask, the capable one, the driven one, the one who's got it together. And maybe you play the part so well that even you forget it's a costume. But when the room goes quiet, when the screen goes dark, when there's no one left to impress, the truth slips through. You are tired of the act. You were told that the chase is noble, that it gives life meaning, that you must always be reaching, striving, climbing, because stillness is dangerous, because slowing down might make you fall behind. But fall behind what? And who decides the pace? Who defined the finish line? And what if you've been sprinting toward a destination that was never yours? What if the ladder you've been climbing is leaning against the wrong wall? No one tells you the cost of the chase. No one warns you that the more you define your identity through doing, the more disconnected you become from simply being. They don't talk about how your worth gets wrapped around productivity like a noose, how rest starts to feel like failure, how even joy becomes another thing to optimize. So you keep moving, keep working, keep proving, afraid that if you stop, it will all unravel. But what you don't realize is that the unraveling is the beginning. The unraveling is where the real you waits, because beneath all the motion is a question you've been avoiding. Who am I without the hustle, without the deadlines, without the performance? Who am I when I'm not achieving, not performing, not producing? Most people never find out, not because the answer isn't there, but because they're too afraid to ask, too afraid to face the silence, too afraid to hear the voice that whispers, "This isn't it. There's more. There's always been more." You were not born to chase. You were born to remember that your value is not transactional, that your presence is not a problem to solve, that your joy is not a luxury, but a compass. The system taught you to chase because a person in pursuit is a person distracted, and a distracted person is easy to manage, easy to manipulate, easy to market to. But a person who remembers their worth, a person who no longer runs, that kind of person is powerful. That kind of person is sovereign. And this is what they fear. Not your failure, but your awakening. Because when you stop chasing, you start seeing. When you stop striving, you start sensing. And when you stop proving, you start reclaiming the pieces of yourself you left behind in the name of success. That is not weakness. That is resurrection. You are not lazy for wanting rest. You are not ungrateful for desiring more. You are not broken for needing a pause. You are human, and your humanity is not a flaw. It's the source of your power. You don't need to push harder. You need to come home. Not to a place, to yourself. They told you that if you worked hard enough, one day you'd finally feel safe. That if you stacked enough hours, chased enough goals, sacrificed enough sleep, eventually you'd earn the right to breathe without guilt. That's the myth most of us are still running on, that peace must be purchased, that rest is a reward for burnout, that joy is something you buy after proving yourself. But the truth is darker and simpler. If you have to earn your life, it's not really yours. How many people do you know who did everything right and still ended up empty? The degree, the job, the mortgage, the schedule packed to the brim with things that look like success from the outside, and still there's a hole. Still there's that quiet ache at the end of the day that whispers, "Why do I feel like I'm missing something I can't name?" It's because you were never taught how to receive. You were only taught how to perform. The system doesn't want you free. It wants you occupied. Not just physically, mentally, emotionally, energetically. It wants your nervous system wired for urgency, your attention looped into output, your sense of self dependent on results. That way, you keep moving, you keep producing, you keep measuring your worth by how many boxes you ticked instead of how deeply you lived. And the moment you pause, guilt floods in. The voice in your head says you're lazy, selfish, falling behind, because it can't tell the difference between stillness and failure. But that voice isn't yours. It was planted there, and now it speaks louder than your own truth. The truth is, you were never meant to struggle this hard just to feel okay. You were never meant to spend your life proving you deserve to be here. Your value was never supposed to be conditional. It was never supposed to be tied to how much you do or how well you perform. You were born enough. But somewhere along the way, you forgot. And that forgetting has shaped your entire life. The choices you made, the dreams you delayed, the way you tense up when someone tells you, you've done enough. There is no finish line where someone hands you permission to rest. No milestone that magically makes you worthy. The whole idea is a trap. And the sooner you see it, the sooner you stop running. The sooner you realize that your life is not a negotiation, not a contract with conditions, not a debt you owe to the grind. It's a birthright. And the moment you claim it, the entire game changes. You don't stop working. You just stop bleeding for it. You don't stop growing. You just stop abandoning yourself in the process. The work now is not to earn your life. It's to unlearn the belief that you have to. It's to remember what it feels like to exist without explanation, to be without performance, to breathe without apology. And that remembering, it's not a mental shift. It's a nervous system revolution. It happens in the pause. In the breath you don't cut short. In the rest you no longer feel guilty for. That's where you begin to reclaim what was always yours. Not after the grind ends, but when you realize it never defined you to begin with. There's a sickness we don't talk about because it hides beneath what we praise. It wears ambition like armor. It speaks in the language of discipline, grind, sacrifice. But beneath the shine, it's hollow. It's the quiet, relentless ache of needing to prove, not once, not twice, but every single day, that you're worthy of love, rest, peace, space. It's the fatigue of existence as performance, of waking up every morning not to live, but to justify why you're allowed to be here. And it doesn't look like suffering. It looks like success. You wake up early, hit the list, answer the messages, take the calls, show up, smile, give, serve, fix, provide, manage, solve, suppress. You keep doing because stopping feels like death, not literal, but death of identity. Because if you're not producing, who are you? If you're not proving, what are you worth? That's the wound most of us carry. The belief that being is not enough, that your humanity must be earned in measurable units of output. And the world rewards it. You get the praise, the promotions, the nods of respect, but inside, you're starving. You can't eat applause. You can't rest on compliments. You can't find home in a job title. And no amount of external validation can fill the void that opened the first time someone taught you love had to be earned. Maybe it was a parent who withheld warmth unless you were good. Maybe it was a teacher who celebrated obedience more than creativity. Maybe it was a culture that glorified exhaustion and called it character. Wherever it began, it shaped the way you see yourself. And now, even in moments of silence, your nervous system still bristles, waiting for the next metric, the next milestone, the next moment that tells you, now you're enough. But enough is not a destination. It's a state of being. It's what you already are when you stop trying to become. And no one tells you this because the system doesn't benefit from people who feel whole. It runs on insecurity, on the constant low-grade anxiety that if you stop hustling, someone else will take your place, your chance, your worth. And so we stay on the wheel, not because we love the chase, but because we fear the fall. Because rest has become synonymous with risk. Because we've forgotten how to trust life without effort laced into every second. And so we carry the cost. We carry it in the way our bodies stay tight even when we lie down. In the way our minds race even when nothing is wrong. In the way we flinch at ease, brace for disappointment, sabotage softness. This is not a personality trait. This is trauma disguised as drive. This is nervous system dysregulation being praised as ambition. And it won't stop until you stop. Until you make the radical choice to believe that your worth is not conditional. That you don't have to bleed for every breath. That life is not earned. It's lived. And that no one, not even your past self, gets to decide that presence must come with a price tag. So sit down, exhale. Let the silence come. Feel the discomfort of not doing, not proving. Let it burn if it has to. That burn is not weakness, it's detox. It's all the unworthiness leaving your body. And when it's gone, what remains is you, not the version that performs, but the one that was always worthy, always whole, always enough without lifting a single finger. You were never supposed to earn your right to exist. That was a lie sold to you in pieces, dressed in traditions and wrapped in praise. It began before you could name it, when love came with conditions, when presence had to be bought with good behavior, when silence was safer than being seen. They didn't mean to do harm, the ones who passed it down. They were simply repeating what they were taught, that worth is something fragile, something granted by others, something you lose if you stop performing. And so you learned to hustle, not just in work, but in identity. You became who they needed. You shaped yourself to be agreeable, admirable, digestible. You smiled through disconnection. You achieved to feel acceptable. You made yourself smaller in rooms that didn't have space for your truth. And you called it survival, because it was. But now, that shape no longer fits. The mask is cracking. The smile is tired. The grind feels empty. Not because you're weak, but because your soul is exhausted from pretending to be something it never was. You don't want more accolades. You want to remember who you were before the pretending began. And here's the truth. No one told you. You were born whole. You didn't arrive in this world with something missing. Your worth was never up for debate. It wasn't attached to your grades, your productivity, your perfection. It was never measured in likes, promotions, praise, or how well you stayed quiet. You didn't come here to be palatable. You came here to be real. And real isn't always pretty. It's messy, raw, complex, contradictory. But it's also magnetic. Because what the world needs most isn't more polished masks. It's more unedited truth. When you reclaim your inherent worthiness, something miraculous happens. You stop begging. You stop apologizing. You stop chasing validation like it's oxygen. You start making choices not to be liked, but to be aligned. You say no when it costs too much. You say yes when it nourishes you. You walk away from dynamics that demand your silence. You stop waiting for permission to be who you already are. And the moment you do, you become untouchable in the most grounded way. Not because nothing can hurt you, but because nothing can convince you that you're not enough. This doesn't mean the world changes overnight. It means you do. And when your inner world shifts, the external begins to rearrange in response. Not because you're controlling it, but because you've stopped distorting yourself to fit into places that were never built for your truth. The people who only loved you for your performance will fall away. The spaces that required your conformity will dissolve, and what remains is real. The relationships rooted in presence, the joy that doesn't need a reason, the quiet knowing that no matter what happens, you are already enough. You don't need more proof. You don't need to achieve one more thing before you're allowed to exhale. You're not here to earn your place on this planet. You're here to remember that you were never unworthy, only temporarily convinced. There's a myth so deeply embedded in our culture that we stop seeing it as a story and start believing it as law. The myth that struggle is noble, that exhaustion is a badge, that burnout is a sign you're doing it right. You hear it in the way people talk about the grind, about how busy they are, about how rest will come later, always later. You see it in how people wear their suffering like armor, competing to prove who's hurting the most, sacrificing the most, pushing through the most. And somewhere along the way, you learn to believe that ease was weakness, that if something came naturally to you, it didn't count, that rest was laziness and joy was a luxury. But what if that's all backwards? What if the true distortion is struggle itself? Not the fact that we experience it, but the fact that we glorify it. What if ease isn't the enemy, but the signal you're in alignment? What if the path doesn't have to hurt to be worthy? What if success doesn't require you to bleed for it? These aren't indulgent questions. They're revolutionary, because we've been trained to equate worth with suffering, as if peace must be earned, as if rest is a debt you have to pay off in advance. The truth is, most people don't need to be told to work harder. They need to be told they're allowed to stop, to breathe, to soften, to choose flow over friction. That doesn't mean you stop showing up. It means you stop showing up from a place of internal collapse. It means your effort is no longer fueled by fear of not being enough, but by the overflow of knowing you already are. And that shift, from fear to trust, from proving to expressing, changes everything. Because when your nervous system no longer sees rest as a threat, you stop sabotaging your own expansion. You stop defaulting to struggle when things go well. You stop clinging to chaos just to feel productive. You don't need to earn your joy. You don't need to exhaust yourself to be worthy of receiving. And you definitely don't need to keep breaking yourself to build a life that barely reflects who you are. There is no glory in depletion. There is no virtue in self-abandonment. And there is nothing admirable about being everything for everyone, but empty inside. Your ancestors didn't survive for you to shrink. They didn't suffer so you could make suffering your identity. They endured so you could expand, not carry their wounds like heirlooms, but transmute them into freedom. The new way isn't built on struggle. It's built on clarity, on sovereignty, on honoring your own rhythm and daring to believe that ease is not escape, it's alignment. That joy is not distraction, it's data. That rest is not a pause from life, it is life. This isn't about giving up. It's about choosing differently, refusing to worship suffering as sacred, refusing to collapse just to prove you're committed, and finally giving yourself permission to build from a place of wholeness, not survival. You've been told to visualize what you want, to make a vision board, to repeat affirmations, to manifest with intention. But no one told you the part that matters most, that the universe doesn't respond to your goals. It responds to your frequency. Not the words you speak when you're calm and hopeful, but the energy you carry when you're doubting, when you're scared, when no one's watching. That's the transmission. That's the broadcast your field is sending out. And it never stops. You're always manifesting, not by force, not by effort, but by coherence. You don't attract what you want. You attract what you are, not the self you perform online, not the self you curate for the world, but the one that hums beneath your skin, the one that flinches at abundance even while affirming it, the one that holds its breath when the bill comes, that shrinks when praised, that lowers its desires to stay palatable. That's the version your frequency is shaped by. And that's the version that creates your reality. Not because you're broken or failing, but because you've been conditioned to believe that what you want is dangerous, too big, too much, too far. You don't need more vision. You need more safety. You need to make it safe in your body to expand. You need to stop trying to manifest from fear and start recalibrating your system to actually receive. Because the moment your nervous system believes abundance is safe, not just possible, but safe, your entire field begins to shift. Opportunities arrive not by accident, but by resonance. Ease becomes natural. Doors stop requiring force because you're no longer broadcasting desperation. You're broadcasting readiness, and that changes everything. Because this isn't mindset work. This isn't think positive and push harder. This is embodiment. This is repatterning. This is the quiet daily practice of becoming the match for what you say you want. It looks like breathing deeply before you send the invoice, like raising your prices and holding the silence, like receiving praise without deflection, like trusting that joy doesn't mean punishment is next. This is the real work. The invisible work, the work that doesn't look impressive, but moves mountains inside your field. You were never meant to beg the world for what you want. You were meant to become it, to move like it's already yours, to breathe like your dreams are inevitable, to let go of the frantic need to prove and settle into the steady truth that you already are the frequency. Because when your field speaks before your words, and that field says, "I trust," the universe answers without hesitation. Not because it favors you, because it recognizes you. You stopped asking. You became the answer. There is a kind of power most people never learn to wield. The power of ease. Not the laziness they've been warned about. Not the passivity mistaken for complacency. But the kind of ease that comes from deep alignment, from being so rooted in your truth that the world no longer needs to be wrestled into submission. You've been taught that struggle equals merit, that the longer you suffer, the more deserving you become. But what if ease wasn't the opposite of effort? What if it was the highest expression of it? What if ease wasn't weakness, but refinement? What if it wasn't a luxury for the lucky, but the result of finally remembering how energy is meant to move? Ease doesn't mean life becomes effortless. It means the energy behind your effort is no longer tangled in resistance. You're not pushing from fear or bracing for loss. You're moving from clarity, from knowing, from sovereignty. You stop leaking energy into self-doubt. You stop burning out trying to prove your place. Instead, you act with precision. You speak with resonance. You move like someone who trusts that the universe isn't a test to pass. It's a mirror to align with, and in that ease, something wild happens. You become magnetic, not because you're doing more, but because your energy becomes undeniable, clean, coherent, safe. People feel it before they understand it. Opportunities respond to it before they're even verbalized. You stop chasing, not because you've given up, but because your field is already speaking for you. because your nervous system is finally calibrated to hold what you asked for. And that's when the blessings that used to feel far away begin to orbit you effortlessly, not as rewards, but as reflections. But this kind of ease requires discipline, not the kind that punishes, the kind that listens, the kind that honors the body's signals, that recognizes when pushing is no longer progress, that knows the difference between momentum and mania. You must become the keeper of your energy, the guardian of your signal. You must learn when to rest, not as an afterthought, but as a strategy. You must let go of urgency as your motivator and begin to move from depth, from clarity, from devotion. Because here's the quiet truth. Ease is not the absence of effort. It's the result of being in right relationship with your energy. It's the gift of knowing who you are, what you want, and no longer abandoning yourself to get it. It's not about doing less. It's about doing only what's aligned, only what nourishes, only what whispers yes in your bones. That's not weakness. That's mastery. There is a particular exhaustion that lives beneath the surface of modern ambition, not the tiredness that comes after honest work, but a deeper fatigue, the kind that comes from striving without ever arriving, from constantly chasing a finish line that keeps moving, from trying to prove your worth to systems that were never built to recognize it. This is not the fatigue of effort. This is the collapse that follows years of running on belief systems that are quietly killing you. Belief systems that say, only when you're exhausted have you earned rest. Only when you're struggling are you on the right path. Only when you're sacrificing are you being noble. But who taught you that rest was a reward instead of a right? Who taught you that your value had to be validated by burnout? Somewhere along the way, your worth got braided into performance. And every time you didn't meet the invisible standard, the shame crept in like a shadow, whispering that maybe you're just not enough. So you pushed harder, hustled longer, faked confidence, ignored your body's signals, smiled while unraveling, and called it discipline. But discipline, in its true form, isn't self-abandonment. It isn't self-erasure. It's devotion to what's real, to what's needed, to what brings you home to yourself. When you operate from chronic striving, your nervous system doesn't know safety, only survival. You can't feel joy without guilt. You can't pause without panic. You've been trained to associate stillness with danger, and so even peace feels like a threat. And because of this, even your victories don't land. You accomplish the goal and feel nothing. You reach the milestone and are already scanning for the next. You're not celebrating, you're bracing. This isn't success. This is self-forgetting. You were not meant to live in a perpetual state of effort. You were not built to grind your soul into dust just to be seen as worthy. That's not evolution. That's enslavement. And it's wearing a new face now. Ambition, achievement, productivity. But the song is the same. You must do more to be enough. And the cost? Your life passes in a blur. Your dreams get buried under deadlines. Your joy is rationed. And your body, your beautiful, intuitive body, becomes the collateral damage. But it doesn't have to stay this way. The moment you recognize the trance, you've already stepped outside of it. The moment you name the pattern, the spell begins to break. You do not need to earn stillness. You do not need to justify your peace. You just need to stop believing the lie that your humanity must be mortgaged for your dreams. You are not here to survive your success. You are here to feel it, to savor it, to expand in it without apology. In a world designed to keep you wanting, enough becomes the most radical thing you can claim. Not just having enough, but feeling like enough. Being enough. Living from enough. Because the machine depends on your dissatisfaction. It relies on your constant hunger. It feeds on the belief that if you could just fix one more flaw, earn one more dollar, cross one more milestone, then you'll arrive. Then you'll be allowed to exhale. But arrival is a mirage. Because the second you get close, the narrative shifts. New goals appear, standards tighten, the finish line moves, again, and again, and again. This is not a system built for fulfillment. This is a system built for extraction. It doesn't care if you're happy. It only cares that you're productive. And the way it ensures that? It teaches you to chase a version of yourself that doesn't exist. The version who's never tired, never scared, never messy, never doubting. The version who's always composed, always accomplished, always in control. But here's the truth they hope you never discover. That version isn't better. She's just quieter, less alive, more obedient. Because chasing perfection isn't self-improvement. It's self-abandonment in disguise. When you start to see through the illusion, something wild happens. You stop moving from lack. You stop measuring your worth in output. You stop asking your reflection to prove something. And in that stillness, in that breath, you begin to remember a different rhythm. The rhythm of wholeness, of sufficiency, of now. And it's disorienting at first, because you've spent your life being told that ease is earned, that rest must be deserved, that feeling good without a reason is somehow indulgent. But what if joy wasn't indulgence? What if it was intelligence? What if your pleasure wasn't a distraction from your purpose? What if it was the compass pointing you toward it? Enough is not complacency. It's clarity. It's the grounded knowing that your worth is not something you hustle to attain. It's something you already carry. It's the ability to look at your life and say, this moment is whole. This version of me is enough. I don't need to hustle for my own permission. And when you live from that place, not just occasionally, but consistently, you become untouchable. Not because you've built walls, but because you've dropped the weapon of self-judgment. And the world, seeing you unbothered by its games, begins to shift around you. This is the beginning of true sovereignty. The moment you stop seeking your reflection in the eyes of those who benefit from your doubt. The moment you stop auditioning for a role you already own. The moment you stop running and realize you were already home. The most dangerous illusions are not the ones you consciously believe. They're the ones you never think to question. The rules written in invisible ink. The agreements passed down without words. The definitions of success, of value, of worthiness that you swallowed before you had the chance to speak. You weren't just handed a world. You were handed a lens, a frame through which to see everything. Yourself, others, what's possible, what's allowed. And that lens was shaped by generations of fear, of struggle, of control. It taught you to look at joy with suspicion, to see rest as laziness, to confuse urgency with importance, and to call self-abandonment sacrifice. This distortion runs deep. It weaves into the architecture of your identity until you think it's you. Until the voice that tells you to keep pushing, to stay small, to wait your turn, feels like common sense. But it's not your voice. It's a script, rehearsed, inherited, and sold back to you in the language of virtue. Be good, be useful, be strong, be quiet. They never told you to be real, because reality, your reality, is unmanageable. It's unpredictable. It doesn't fit in templates or timelines. So they taught you to tame yourself instead, to round your edges, to second-guess your instincts, to trade your inner fire for outer approval. But what they didn't account for is this: distortion only works as long as you believe it, and something in you doesn't believe it anymore. Maybe not loudly, maybe not all at once, but the cracks are showing. The narrative is thinning. You're starting to feel the friction between what you were taught and what you know. And that knowing is not logical. It's cellular. It lives in your breath, in your tension, in the ache that says something isn't right. You can't explain it, but you can't unfeel it either. And that's where the unraveling begins. Not with a revolution, but with a question, a pause, a refusal to play along. Because when you stop rehearsing the lie, the truth doesn't need to scream. It just stands there, quietly waiting, as it always has. The dissolution of distortion is not a clean process. It's not pretty. It's a holy mess. It's grief. It's rage. It's confusion. It's the disorientation that comes from realizing most of what you were taught to pursue was never yours to begin with. And yet, beneath all of that, it's also freedom. Real, raw, untamed freedom. The kind that doesn't come from getting what you want, but from finally remembering you don't have to want what they told you to. That you don't need to chase anything to be complete. That you're not here to fit the frame. You're here to shatter it. And when you do, when the distortion dissolves, the world doesn't just look different. It is different. Because you're no longer seeing through the lens they handed you. You're seeing with your own eyes, feeling with your own body, choosing with your own soul. And nothing is more dangerous to the system than a human being who remembers that. You were taught to give, to stretch, to serve, to show up even when you were empty, to pour from a cup that never got refilled. Giving became your identity, your safety, your proof of goodness. And somewhere along the way, you forgot that receiving is just as sacred, maybe even more so, because receiving requires trust, not just in others, but in yourself, in your worth, in your capacity to be held, in your willingness to let life meet you without earning it first. Most people don't resist abundance because they don't want it. They resist it because they've been trained to believe they must justify it. They feel safer in the role of the provider, the fixer, the one who always has it together. But receiving? That's vulnerable. That means admitting need. That means letting the guard down. That means allowing yourself to be seen in your softness, in your ache, in your humanness. And that goes against everything you were conditioned to be. But here's the paradox. The more you grip, the less can enter. The more you prove, the less you remember. You can pray for overflow while bracing against it. You can speak of trust while silently rehearsing collapse. And your nervous system, wise, ancient, attuned, will always respond to what's felt, not what's said. So even as you affirm that you're ready to receive, your body might still whisper, "It's not safe. It's too much. What if I lose it?" That whisper carries more weight than all your mantras combined. To truly receive is to rewire. It's to teach your body, gently and repeatedly, that rest is not laziness, that joy is not frivolous, that ease is not a threat. It's to practice staying open when the instinct is to retreat, to let the compliments land, to accept the offer, to raise your prices without apology, to let yourself be loved without suspicion, to say yes without a justification. These are not small things. They are radical acts of reclamation, because when you receive fully, without shame, You break the cycle. You interrupt generations of depletion. You shift the pattern from survival to sufficiency. You stop being the martyr and become the mirror, reflecting back to the world what's possible when a person finally lets themselves be filled. This isn't about entitlement. It's about balance, about restoring the sacred flow. Inhale and exhale. Give and receive, not as opposites, but as partners in a dance that was never meant to be one-sided. So if you've been feeling the pull to slow down, to open up, to soften, follow it. That's not weakness. That's your wholeness asking to be remembered. Let yourself be met. Let yourself be held. Let life give back to you. Because you're not here to be a faucet. You're here to be the well, full, radiant, receiving without guilt, overflowing without fear. At some point, you must decide to stop performing for a life you've already earned. You must lay down the armor of competence, of hustle, of hyperfunctionality that you've worn like a second skin. Because deep down, you know, none of this is sustainable. The proving, the posturing, the quiet desperation to be seen as valuable. You've run every script they gave you. Be useful, be impressive, be irreplaceable. And maybe it got you the applause. Maybe it earned you a seat at the table. But did it give you peace? Did it ever make you feel like you were home in yourself? Because that's what this has always been about. Not success, not recognition, not another achievement to check off a list. It's about coming home, to your body, to your breath, to the you beneath the titles, beneath the roles, beneath the polished perfection you've curated for survival. You were never meant to live in defense mode. You were never meant to grip so tightly to your value that your joy became conditional. You were never meant to spend your entire life convincing the world that you deserve to be here. But the world is loud. It sells worth like a currency, tied to output, appearance, production. It told you rest is lazy, that joy must be earned, that your softness makes you weak. So you adapted, you worked, you climbed, you played the game so well that even you started to believe the version of yourself you created for others. But the real you, the deep, knowing, sovereign you, they've been waiting, not for your next milestone, but for your surrender. You don't have to prove anymore. Not your intelligence, not your discipline, not your heart. The ones who can't see it were never meant to hold it. You don't have to shrink your joy to make others comfortable. You don't have to downplay your dreams so they sound more realistic. You don't have to carry the weight of everyone's expectations like it's your cross to bear. Because the truth is, you don't owe anyone a version of you that forgets yourself. Let this be the moment you stop chasing your worth in mirrors that were never designed to reflect it. Let this be the breath where you release the lie that you must do to be enough. You already are, not because you've done the work, but because you exist. You are not a machine. You are not a role. You are not a brand. You are a being, alive, sacred, whole. And no amount of external validation will ever compare to the peace of finally validating yourself. Real alignment doesn't just arrive in grand epiphanies. It settles in the unnoticed places, in the way you move through your morning, in how you answer the question, "How are you?" without performance. It shows up in the pause before you say yes to something you don't actually want, in the decision to rest when the old pattern says, push. It reveals itself not in the highs of manifestation, but in the lows, when the momentum pauses, when results don't appear immediately, and you still choose to trust. That's the moment your nervous system learns safety, not in control, but in surrender. It's the breath you release without bargaining, the step you take without demanding proof, the way you stay open, not because you're guaranteed the outcome, but because you've remembered that the outcome was never the source of your worth. The clarity you've been chasing was never something to achieve. It's what happens when you stop abandoning yourself to earn what was already yours. You were never meant to live in constant pursuit. The field responds to embodiment, not exhaustion. The truth is, the version of you who receives with ease isn't more deserving. They're just more present. They're the version who doesn't flinch when life offers them more. They don't shrink when expansion knocks. They don't second-guess joy. They don't rehearse collapse as a way to brace for disappointment. And that version lives inside you now. Not one day, not someday, now. But to become them, you have to stop asking life to prove your worth. You have to stop bargaining with the mirror. You have to stop playing small to keep others comfortable, or hiding behind realism as a shield from the audacity of your own power. This doesn't mean abandon humility. It means redefine it. True humility isn't shrinking. It's recognizing the divine within you and choosing to act in alignment with it. It's knowing you are not the source of all things, but you are a portal through which all things move. This is the real currency of transformation. Not intensity, but consistency. Not big moments of effort, but small moments of truth, repeated until they become default. The moment you say, "I receive with ease," and don't override it with guilt. The moment you allow joy without planning its expiration. The moment you feel spaciousness and resist the urge to fill it. These are the new codes. This is the unlearning. The detangling from survival as an identity. The breaking of agreements you didn't even know you made. The ones that said love must be earned, rest must be justified, and worth is conditional. Let them fall. Let them burn. Because every time you honor ease, every time you stay soft where you once braced, every time you choose to expand without apology, you rewire the signal. You become the frequency. You remember, I am the current. And once you remember, once you let the truth settle, not just into your thoughts, but into your breath, your blood, your bones, everything changes. Not because the world shifts, but because your relationship to it does. The noise that used to pull you off center, it fades. The triggers that once stole your peace, they pass like background static. You don't need to argue for your limitations anymore. You don't need to over-explain why you're choosing alignment over obligation. You simply move from knowing, from signal, from coherence, and the world, slowly, then all at once, bends to that signal. Not because it's magic, but because it's law. Life doesn't give you what you beg for. It gives you what you are willing to hold. And when your nervous system becomes fluent in receiving, when your inner world stops preparing for collapse, the doors that used to feel locked swing open, not because you forced them, but because you stopped hiding from them. So this is your permission slip, not from me, not from anyone else, from you to you. Permission to stop earning what's already yours. Permission to stop rehearsing pain as a prerequisite for peace. Permission to rise, to rest, to receive, to radiate. Not as a reward, but as a remembrance. You were always allowed. You were always ready. The world tried to convince you that readiness looked like perfection, but it never did. Readiness is presence, it's clarity, it's willingness. And if something inside you has stirred, if you've felt the quiet ache of truth beneath these words, then you are ready. Not tomorrow. Not when you've healed every wound or solved every piece of your life. now in your current skin, with your current fears, with your current heart. You don't need to become more. You only need to become you again. So return. Return to the well. Return to the source. Return to the self that was never lost, only layered. And from that place, watch as life rearranges itself around your remembering. No more waiting. No more shrinking. No more silent loyalty to scarcity. You were not made to survive your dreams. You were made to live them. You were not made to ration your light. You were made to become it. This is the remembering. This is the return. And you, just as you are the signal the world has been waiting for. Welcome home.